The alien warlord stood before the crowd, his chitus exoskeleton glistening under the twin suns of Voss 5. His species, the Gorth, had conquered a dozen star systems, crushing every civilization that dared challenge them. Now they faced humanity, primitive, emotional, and in their eyes, utterly unremarkable. Commander Zaldich of the Gorth raised his bladed arm and pointed at the human prisoner. I challenge you to a duel. If you win, your people may live. If you lose, humanity dies. The human, battered and restrained, lifted his head. Blood trickled from a cut on his brow, but his blue eyes burned with something Zaldich had never seen before, rage. The human's name was Daniel Briggs, a Marine from Earth. His unit had been ambushed during a reconnaissance mission, and he was the only survivor. He had witnessed his men slaughtered, their bodies torn apart by the Gorth's merciless warriors. Zaldich expected fear. He expected begging. Instead, Daniel grinned, his teeth stained red with his own blood. You want a duel? Daniel spat on the ground. Fine, but you're not ready for this. The alien warlord chittered in amusement. Your weapons are gone. Your armor is broken. You are weak. Daniel chuckled, rolling his shoulders. You have no idea what you just started. The crowd of alien warriors encircled them, their mandibles clicking in anticipation. They had witnessed hundreds of duels before. None had ever been lost by a Gorth. A ceremonial blade was tossed at Daniel's feet, a crude weapon made for spectacle. He picked it up, twirling it in his fingers, testing the weight. Zaldich lunged first, moving with the speed of something born to kill. His arm blade sliced through the air, aiming for Daniel's throat, but Daniel wasn't there. He sidestepped faster than the alien expected and drove his fist into Zaldartich's ribs. There was a loud crack as the exoskeleton dented under the sheer force of the punch. The crowd gasped. Zaldich stumbled back, his mandibles twitching in confusion. He had fought warriors from countless worlds. None had ever hit like that. Daniel's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. His vision blurred with pain, but his body moved on instinct, fueled by something the Gorth could never understand. Pure, unfiltered rage, not fear, not desperation. Zaldich roared and lunged again, this time more cautiously. His blades flashed in the sunlight as he slashed at Daniel's midsection. Daniel twisted, barely dodging. The blade nicked his ribs, drawing blood, but he didn't stop. With a roar of his own, he tackled Zaldich, used his full weight to slam the alien to the ground. He mounted the warlord and brought the crude blade down in a savage arc. The first stab dented the exoskeleton. The second cracked it. The third pierced through, spilling thick black ichor onto sand. Zaldich screeched in pain, his limbs flailing. Daniel didn't stop. He kept driving the blade in again and again, his vision a blur of red. Finally, Daniel stood, his breath ragged. The warlord's body lay motionless beneath him. Daniel turned to the watching Gorth warriors. He was drenched in blood, his own and theirs. His hands were shaking, not from fear but from the adrenaline still pumping through his veins. "Who's next?" he growled. No one moved. For the first time in their history, the Gorth had witnessed something terrifying. Not strength, not skill, but human rage. And they weren't ready for it. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The gathered Gorth warriors, beasts who had slaughtered their way across the stars, now stood frozen, their predatory confidence shattered. Their champion, their warlord, lay broken at the feet of a single human. Daniel wiped his face with the back of his hand, smearing blood across his cheek. His breathing was heavy, his ribs ached, but his heart pounded like a war drum in his chest. He turned slowly, eyes scanning the ring of aliens surrounding him. None stepped forward. "Nothing," he spat onto the sand. "You were all so eager a minute ago. Now you're scared." His lips curled into a bitter smirk. Figures. A low growl rumbled through the crowd. The Gorth were killers, conquerors, and yet they hesitated. Their instincts told them that this was different. This wasn't just another species. This was a human, a creature that bled, suffered, and still fought like hell. The Gor's second in command, a brute named Valker, stepped forward. His mandibles clicked in agitation. He was larger than Zaldich, his exoskeleton thicker, his blades longer. "You think this proves something human?" he hissed. "You killed one, but there are thousands of us." Daniel exhaled slowly. He could barely stand. If they all rushed him, he wouldn't last a minute. But he didn't need to win the fight. He just needed to start something. "You think this is just about me?" Daniel laughed, the sound raw and broken. "You think I'm the only human like this?" His blue eyes burned with something primal, something ancient. "You don't get it, do you? You're used to enemies that break, that submit." He stepped forward, his boots crunching on the sand, his muscles screaming in protest. But he ignored the pain. "Humans don't break. We don't kneel. We don't surrender." He pointed the bloody blade at Valker's chest. "You wanted a duel. You got one. But this fight doesn't end here." A ripple of uncertainty passed through the gathered warriors. Daniel could see it in their movements, the hesitation, the doubt creeping into their insectoid minds. This was not how things were supposed to go. The Gorth fought for dominance, for control. But what did they do when faced with something that wouldn't submit? Then a noise, a deep mechanical hum in the distance. Daniel turned his head, his battered body tensing. And then his heart nearly stopped. The thunderstrike, an Earth warship. The roar of engines filled the air as the massive battleship descended from the clouds, its cannons glowing with charged plasma. Drop ships detached from its hull, streaking downward like falling stars. Reinforcements. The Gorth warriors tensed, their mandibles clicking in panic. Valker hissed, his head snapping up as he saw the human warship bearing down on them. Daniel smiled, his teeth stained red. "You were right about one thing," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am just one human." The ground trembled as the first drop pods slammed into sand. The doors hissed open, and more humans stepped out, armed, furious, and ready to finish what Daniel had started. The battlefield shifted in an instant. A moment ago, Daniel had been alone, just one battered human standing against a ring of alien warriors. Now the tide had turned. The thunderstrike loomed overhead, casting its massive shadow across the arena. Drop ships landed one after another, kicking up sand and dust, their hatches hissing open as armored Marines stormed out. They weren't just soldiers. They were his soldiers. The 103rd Shock Battalion, the best damn warriors humanity had to offer. Valker's mandibles twitched, his blade arms flexing as he turned his gaze from Daniel to the soldiers spilling onto the field. For the first time, the Gorth weren't the ones surrounding their enemy. They were outnumbered. "You wanted a duel," Daniel rasped, his voice rough with exhaustion and blood loss. He nodded toward the Marines, now forming a battle line with their rifles trained on the enemy. "Well, congratulations. You just got one." The first shot rang out. A high-powered kinetic round ripped through a Gorth warrior's skull, splattering black ichor across the sand. The alien screeched, startled. A second shot followed, then a third, then all hell broke loose. The Marines opened fire in coordinated bursts, their weapons cutting to the stunned Gorth with ruthless efficiency. The aliens, so used to being hunters, found themselves staggering back under the sheer ferocity of the human counterattack. Daniel dropped to one knee, barely able to keep himself upright as bullets and plasma bolts sliced through the air around him. A shadow fell over him. "Sir!" Sergeant Valdez, the burly Marine, knelt beside Daniel, his rifle held ready as he surveyed the chaos. "Damn, Briggs. You really had to start the party without us," he grinned, but there was steel behind his eyes. Daniel coughed, tasting copper. "Took your sweet time." Valdez smirked. Traffic was hell. More Marines stormed past them, their combat boots kicking up dust. The Gorth were still fighting back, but their formation was breaking. They weren't just losing, they were panicking. Daniel forced himself to stand. His ribs screamed in protest, but he pushed the pain down, his fingers clenched into fists as he watched the battle unfold. For the first time, the Gorth were experiencing what it meant to fight humans. Not as individuals, not in duels, but as an army. Valkyr roared in fury, slicing 2 Marines in half with a desperate sweep of his massive blades. But the moment he did, 3 more Marines unloaded their rifles into him, shredding his exoskeleton with a hail of gunfire. He fell backward, twitching, his lifeblood pooling around him. Another warrior lunged forward, shrieking, only to be met with a grenade to the face. The explosion sent alien limbs flying in all directions. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was a slaughter. Daniel staggered forward, gripping Valdez's shoulder for support. He gestured toward the remaining Gorth, now frantically retreating, some even dropping their weapons. "Tell me you're recording this," Daniel muttered. "Oh, yeah," Valdez chuckled. "Going to make one hell of a recruitment vid." The battlefield was quiet now, save for crackling of flames and the distant groans of the dying. What had once been a proud gathering of Gorth warriors was now a field of corpses, their exoskeletons shattered, their ichor soaking into the sand. The few who had managed to escape were long gone, vanishing into the hills beyond the ruined dueling arena. Daniel stood in the center of it all, barely able to stay upright. His muscles trembled from exhaustion, his wounds screaming in protest. Blood dripped from his fingers, though he wasn't sure how much of it was his. The thunderstrike hovered above, casting a long shadow over the battlefield. Drop ships were still descending, but there was no fight left to join. The battle was over, and humanity had won. Sergeant Valdez walked up beside him, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He nudged one of the fallen Gorth warriors with his boot, shaking his head. "Damn," he muttered. "You really took the fight out of these bastards." Daniel let out a low chuckle, though it hurt to do so. They thought they could break us. He looked out at the field of dead aliens, his vision still slightly blurred. They didn't understand. Valdez grinned. "Oh, they understand now." A voice crackled in Daniel's earpiece. "Commander Briggs, this is Captain Reynolds. Report." Daniel tapped his comms. "We engaged the enemy. Took losses, but they took worse. The remaining Gorth forces retreated." There was a pause before Reynolds spoke again. "Copy that. Reinforcements are securing the area. Get your men back on the Thunderstrike. We need to debrief." Daniel exhaled. He was still running on fumes, barely keeping himself standing, but he nodded anyway. "Roger that." Valdez clapped him on the back. "Come on, boss. Let's get you patched up before you drop dead on US." The 2 men walked toward the waiting drop ships, the rest of the Marines falling in behind them. The battle was over, but something deeper had shifted. The Gorth had learned something today. They had faced humanity, and they had lost not just the superior weapons, not just the tactics. They had lost to something they had never encountered before, something they couldn't understand: rage, determination, a refusal to break. This war was far from over. But Daniel knew one thing for sure: the Gorth would think twice before ever challenging humans again. Because the next time they did, there wouldn't be anyone left to retreat. The war was far from over. Even as the drop ship lifted Daniel and his men away from the battlefield, he knew this victory was just the beginning. The Gorth were a proud, war-hardened species. They wouldn't take this loss lightly. If anything, this humiliation would drive them to retaliate harder than ever before. Daniel sat against the cold metal of the drop ship's interior, his head resting back as a medic patched up his wounds. He barely registered the sting of the stitches or the pressurized foam sealing his deeper cuts. His mind was still in the fight, still seeing the terrified looks in the aliens' eyes as they realized what they were truly up against. Across from him, Valdez cleaned his rifle, glancing up now and then. "You know they'll be back, right?" Daniel opened one eye, smirking despite the pain. "They have to be. They can't let this stand." Valdez let out a low whistle. "Damn. We finally made the boogeyman scared of us." Daniel didn't answer because deep down he wasn't celebrating. This was a warning shot. The Gorth wouldn't make the same mistake twice. They had underestimated humans in one-on-one combat. Now they'd come back with numbers, with new strategies, with something worse. Daniel clenched his fists. Let them come. The drop ship docked inside the Thunderstrike. The sudden hiss of pressure equalization, snapping him back to the present. The back hatch opened, revealing the bright white lights of the warship's hangar. Dozens of engineers and medics rushed to receive the wounded. Other Marines disembarked, their faces a mix of exhaustion and triumph. As Daniel stepped off the ramp, a voice called out, "Briggs." Captain Reynolds strode toward him, her uniform pristine despite the chaos, her piercing green eyes scanning him up and down, assessing the damage. "You look like hell." "Feel like it too," Daniel admitted. She didn't smile. "Debriefing. Now." Daniel sighed, wiping some dried blood from his cheek. "At least buy me dinner first." Reynolds turned on her heel, already walking toward the command center. "Move, Briggs." Valdez chuckled, clapping Daniel on the shoulder as they followed her. "You know she likes you, right?" "Shut up, Valdez." The command center was a stark contrast of battlefield, clean, orderly, the hum of data streams flickering across massive hollow displays. Officers moved with purpose, coordinating fleet movements and processing intelligence reports. Daniel took his seat at the large table in the center of the room. Around it sat high-ranking officers, intelligence analysts, and a few other squad leaders. Reynolds stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. "First things first," she began. "Good work. We sent a message today." Daniel didn't relax. "Yeah, you think they got it?" She met his eyes. "They got it," loud and clear. A hollow image flickered to life above the table. Grainy combat footage from helmet cams replaying Daniel's duel with Zal RTH. The moment where he drove his knife into the alien warlord's chest plate in slow motion, the crowd's horrified silence captured in stunning clarity. Then came the retreat, the panic, the once feared Gorth running for their lives. Intel suggests the Gorth command structure is in disarray. When the analyst said, "They weren't prepared for this kind of resistance. They thought we'd break." "They thought wrong," Valdez muttered. Reynolds nodded. "That said, we can't assume they'll stay rattle for long." This was a wake-up call for them. "They'll adapt." Daniel exhaled. "So what's our next move?" She tapped control on the table, and a new image appeared, a Gorth fleet formation. Massive warships, more than 3 times the size of the Thunderstrike, moving in coordinated attack patterns. "They're regrouping," Reynolds said, "and they're bringing reinforcements. We intercepted transmissions suggesting they've called in additional fleets from their outer colonies." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "They're preparing for war." She met his gaze. "They already started one." The room fell silent. Daniel leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. He could feel the weight of it now, the sheer scale of what they had triggered. Humanity had been fighting to survive in the galaxy for decades, struggling to carve out a place among hostile species. But now they weren't just fighting for survival. Now they were fighting to win. Daniel looked around at the officers, the soldiers, the analysts. They all knew what was coming. The Gorth were coming back, and this time they wouldn't be making any mistakes. Daniel flexed his fingers, his knuckles still raw from the fight. "Good. Let them come." Because humanity wasn't just ready for war. They were built for it. The war drums of the Gorth pounded across the stars. Daniel sat in the dimly lit barracks, his hands wrapped in bandages, watching the hollow screen in front of him. The intercepted transmission played again, the guttural clicks and hisses of the Gorth War Council filling the room. Though their language was still being deciphered, the translation software had caught enough. Humans, unacceptable threat, full mobilization, burn their worlds, leave nothing. Daniel smirked. So predictable. The Gorth had never been challenged like this before. Their pride had been wounded, their warriors humiliated, their fleet sent into disarray. Instead of accepting their loss, they had chosen the only path they understood, total war. He leaned back against the wall, exhaling through his nose. His ribs still ached from the duel, but the pain was dull now, more of a reminder than a hindrance. He had won that fight, but this was going to be something else entirely. The door slid open, and Valdez stepped inside, a fresh cigar clenched between his teeth. "Well, boss, looks like we pissed in the wrong alien's breakfast." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Valdez sat across from him, his expression turning more serious. "Reynolds just got word from command. The Gorth aren't just bringing one fleet, they're bringing 5. Daniel's fingers tightened around the edge of the cot. 5 fleets. That was millions of troops, warships that could glass entire planets. And they were all coming for Earth's forces. "Let me guess," Daniel muttered. "High Command wants us to run?" Valdez nodded. "Yep. Pull back, regroup, live a fight another day." He scoffed. "But Reynolds isn't having it. She wants to hit them first." Daniel grinned. "Now that's the captain I know." Valdez leaned in. "She's putting together a strike team. A small one. Deep infiltration into the heart of the Gorth fleet before they even get here." Daniel's grin widened. "Sabotage?" Valdez nodded. "More like pure chaos. Cut their command structure apart from the inside. Mess with their supply chains. Turn their own ships against them." Daniel's blood ran hot. This was what he lived for, not waiting, not reacting, but attacking, striking first, hard. "When do we leave?" he asked. Valdez grinned. "You're already packed." The thunderstrike cut through the void, leading a small detachment of stealth ships toward the edge of Gorth-controlled space. Every soldier aboard knew the stakes. If this mission failed, the Gorth would descend on humanity like a tidal wave, unstoppable and merciless. Daniel stood in the armory, strapping himself into his combat suit. It was a sleek, reinforced design built for maneuverability in zero-G combat. The helmet sealed with a hiss, his HUD flickering to life, outlining the weapons racked along the wall. Valdez was already suited up, checking his rifle. "You ready for this, boss?" Daniel grabbed a combat knife, twirling it between his fingers. "I was born ready." A voice crackled over the comms. "All teams, prepare for drop." Daniel clenched his fists. The hunt was on, and this time, humanity was the predator. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a sea of darkness punctuated by the distant glow of hostile warships. Daniel stood inside the dimly lit drop bay, his helmet locked into place, his visor scanning the battlefield ahead. The Thunderstrike and its attachment of stealth ships had already reached the outer rim of the Gorth fleet, a massive armada that loomed over a war-torn planet below. There were thousands of ships. Their mission was insane, and Daniel wouldn't have it any other way. Reynolds' voice crackled over the comms. "Briggs, you and your team will infiltrate their command carrier. Your objective is to disable their coordination systems, scramble their orders, turn their fleet into a disorganized mess. If we do this right, we don't just buy time, we make them bleed." Daniel smirked. "Copy that, Captain." Valdez knelt beside him, checking his gear one last time. "Hell of a way to die, huh?" "Who said anything about dying?" Daniel chuckled. The drop bay lights flashed red. 30 seconds to launch. The plan was simple. Their drop pod, small, undetectable, and moving too fast for most scanners, would launch straight at the Gorth command carrier, embedding them inside the ship like bullets. From there, they'd tear through the warship's corridors, wreaking havoc until the enemy fleet was thrown into chaos. High Command had wanted to run. Instead, they were bringing the fight straight to the heart of the enemy. 10 seconds. Daniel flexed his fingers. His blood ran hot, his heart pounding in perfect rhythm with the countdown. 5. Valdez cracked his knuckles. "Let's give him hell." 3. Daniel grinned. "No mercy." 1. The drop pods fired. The force slammed Daniel back against his seat as he shot through the void, the Gorth fleet growing larger by the second. His pod's thrusters adjusted course, making him nothing more than a speck of debris on the enemy's scanners. Then the impact. The pod pierced through the hull of the Gorth command carrier, cutting through layers of armor before screeching to a stop. The metal walls around him groaned under the stress, sparks flying. The moment the systems detected a stable position, the hatch blasted open. Daniel surged forward, rifle raised, and he wasn't alone. All around the ship, other drop pods crashed through the hull, their hatches exploding outward as human soldiers poured into the corridors. Suppressed gunfire echoed through the halls, cutting down confused alien guards before they could react. Alarms blared. Daniel smirked. Here we go. A towering Gorth warrior rounded the corner, mandibles clicking in rage, its bladed limbs raised to strike. Daniel didn't slow. He ducked the first swipe, rolled forward, and drove his combat knife straight into the creature's throat. Black ichor sprayed across his visor. The alien gurgled, twitching violently before collapsing. Daniel ripped the knife free and kept moving. Valdez and the rest of the team stormed to the corridors, sweeping room after room, leaving a trail of dead in their wake. They weren't here to fight a war. They were here to butcher the enemy before they even knew what hit them. The real war, that would come after. Daniel tapped his comms. Captain, we're in. Proceeding to the main control hub. Reynolds' voice came through. Good. Make it hurt, Briggs. Daniel grinned. Oh, I plan to. And then the real carnage began. The corridors of the Gorth command carrier were painted in blood. Daniel moved like a ghost, his boots silent against the metal floor, his rifle spitting death in short, efficient bursts. The Gorth soldiers, tall, armored brutes with bladed limbs, were warriors, but they weren't ready for this. Humans didn't fight fair. Humans didn't give them a chance to adjust, to counter, to strategize. Humans tore through them like monsters in the dark. Valdez pressed against the wall ahead, his fist raised to signal a halt. Daniel and the rest of the team crouched low, weapons at the ready. The overhead lights flickered red, emergency alarms screeching as the ship tried to contain the breach. Daniel activated his visor scanner. Beyond the door ahead, he saw them, a full squad of Gorth warriors setting up a defensive line, heavy weapons, reinforcements pouring in. They knew the humans were coming. Good. Let them. Daniel motioned to his team. Stack up. Hit them hard. Valdez pulled a grenade from his belt, gave it a twirl, and lobbed it through the doorway. A split second later, boom! The explosion ripped through the chamber, shattering armor and sending alien bodies flying. Then the team moved. Daniel stormed in first, rifle up, dropping 2 Gorth warriors before they could recover. A third lunged at him with a screech. Blades flashing. Daniel twisted aside, grabbed the alien's arm, and ripped it forward, using its own momentum to slam it into the ground. Before it could rise, Daniel jammed his boot against its throat and pulled the trigger. The floor was slick with ichor. Valdez and the others cut through the remaining defenders with brutal efficiency. The last Gorth tried to flee, only to catch a blade to the spine. Silence, then. Daniel turned to the massive blast doors at the end of the chamber. Behind them lay the primary control hub, the beating heart of the ship's communications network, their target. Daniel activated his comms. Captain, we're at the door. Reynolds' voice was sharp. Then break it open. Fast. Daniel nodded. He turned to his demolitions expert, Harper, who was already unpacking a series of breaching charges. Make it quick, Daniel said. Harper grinned. Oh, this is going to be fun. The team took cover as she planted explosives, setting the detonation sequence. The Gorth had probably locked the doors, reinforced them. Didn't matter. Nothing was stopping them. Harper gave a thumbs up. Fire in the hole. The explosion roared through the chamber, and the doors were gone. Daniel was already moving before the smoke cleared. The control hub was a sprawling command center filled with towering data pillars, glowing alien interfaces, and rows of panicked Gorth officers scrambling to respond. It was chaos. Daniel raised his rifle, and then the slaughter began. The first 3 aliens barely had time to react before they were cut down. The rest scattered, desperate to call for reinforcements. Daniel spotted the lead officer, an elder Gorth with intricate battle scars running down his exoskeleton. He was trying to transmit an emergency signal. Daniel wasn't having it. He charged, slamming into the alien, driving his knife deep into its chest. The officer screeched, flailing, but Daniel twisted the blade and wrenched it free, sending the creature crumpling to the floor. Blood dripped from his hands. The command center was theirs. Valdez kicked over a console, scanning the room. "We done here." Daniel shook his head. "Not yet." He pointed to the main control interface, alien symbols flickering in a chaotic, unreadable mess. "Harper, get in there. Shut them down. Scramble their comms. Make this fleet blind." Harper cracked her knuckles. "On it, boss." She moved fast, plugging a hacking device into the nearest terminal, her fingers flying over a modified keyboard. Within seconds, the entire Gore fleet was in disarray. Their battle formations fell apart. Their chain of command collapsed, their war machine now deaf, blind, and panicking. Daniel smirked. "Captain," he said into his comms, "their comms are fried. Their fleet's turning into a mess." Reynolds' voice was filled with satisfaction. "Good. Now get the hell out of there." Daniel turned to his team. "You heard her. Time to move." But then a deep, guttural roar filled the chamber. The remaining screens flickered, then one central hollow image appeared. A Gorth warlord. Not just any warlord. The warlord, High Commander Vern, the one leading this invasion. His massive, predatory form loomed on the screen, his mandibles curling in fury. His voice came through, distorted but dripping with pure rage. "Humans, you think this is victory?" Daniel's smirk didn't fade. "I think we just kicked your ass, yeah?" Varun didn't flinch. "You are insects clawing at giants. You may have drawn blood, but now you will learn what it means to face true destruction." Outside, alarms blared. The fleet, though crippled, was still massive, and now they were turning their weapons toward the planet below. Daniel's blood ran cold. The Gorth weren't going to fight this war. They were going to wipe out every human colony in their path. This wasn't just an invasion. It was extermination. Daniel turned to Valdez, his voice grim. "We need to move. Now." Varun's mandibles curled into something resembling a cruel smile. "Run, little humans. Run while you can." The screen cut out. Daniel clenched his fists. No more running. It was time to end this. The moment the transmission cut out, the Gorth warship lurched, its emergency thrusters firing, as if the entire vessel was preparing for something catastrophic. Daniel barely had time to process it before his comms flared with Reynolds' voice. "Briggs, the fleet's realigning. They're moving into planetary bombardment positions. If they fire, they'll wipe out every colony below." His gut twisted. This wasn't a battle anymore. This was a race against genocide. Daniel spun to Harper. "Tell me you can crash this ship into their own fleet." Harper blinked. "Wait, what?" "I mean it," Daniel snapped. "Overload the engines. Set a course for their biggest command ship, and make sure this bastard never fires again." Harper hesitated for half a second, then she grinned. "Oh, you really know how to make a girl's job fun." She got to work, fingers flying over the alien console, hijacking the warship's navigation system. Meanwhile, Valdez had his rifle trained on the entrance. Boss," he muttered. "We got company." Daniel turned just in time to see a squad of heavily armored Gorths storming through the ruined blast doors. They weren't grunts. They weren't even elite warriors. These were executioners, the kind of soldiers the Gorths sent when they wanted something erased. Daniel raised his rifle. "Hold the line." The first alien charged, its bladed arms slicing through the air with lightning speed. Daniel ducked, pivoted, and fired 3 rounds straight into its torso. The impact staggered it, but it didn't stop. The armor was thick, too thick. Before the alien could strike, Valdez roared and tackled it from the side, both of them crashing into a control console. Sparks erupted as Valdez jammed his combat knife into the alien's throat, twisting hard. Ichor gushed from the wound. Another executioner lunged from the side, claws aimed straight for Daniel's chest. He sidestepped, flipped his rifle, and drove the butt of it into the alien's skull, knocking it back. Then he flipped it forward again and emptied the clip into its face. More of them came. Gunfire roared through the chamber, the squad moving like a well-oiled machine, cutting down the enemy one by one. Harper, still working at the console, called out, "A little longer, guys." Daniel didn't answer. A massive executioner slammed into him, sending him flying. He crashed against a metal floor, his rifle skidding away. The alien loomed over him, mandibles dripping, its bladed arm raised for the kill. Daniel roared. He ripped his combat knife from his belt and drove it into the thing's leg, yanking hard. The alien screeched in pain, just enough for Daniel to grab his own arm, twist, and plunge the blade into its own chest. The creature twitched, then collapsed. Daniel rolled to his feet, panting. "Now, Harper." Harper slammed the final override into place. Engines overloaded. This ship is going straight into their flagship. Daniel didn't hesitate. Time to leave. The squad sprinted for the escape route, cutting through whatever resistance was left. The ship rumbled beneath them, shaking violently as the engines burned at max capacity. The Thunderstrike's dropships were already waiting at the extraction point. They dived inside just as the warship lurched forward, its entire frame groaning under the stress. The moment they cleared the hangar, Reynolds' voice snapped through the comms. "All personnel, brace for impact." Daniel gripped the overhead rails as the dropship accelerated away from the Gorth command vessel. Through the viewport, he watched as the massive warship, now a burning arrow of twisted metal, surged toward the Gorth flagship. The aliens were trying to evade, but it was too late. The impact was blinding. The command vessel slammed into the flagship's port side, tearing through armor plating like paper. Secondary explosions rippled across both ships as ammunition stores and fuel cells detonated in chain reactions. The flagship listed to one side, now hemorrhaging atmosphere and crew into the void. "Direct hit," Valdez whispered, his face illuminated by the distant carnage. Daniel nodded grimly. One down. Too many to go. The drop ship docked to the Thunderstrike, and Daniel stepped onto the deck to find Captain Reynolds waiting, her face set in stone. "Good work, Briggs," she said. "But the Gorth are adapting faster than we anticipated." She gestured to the tactical display. The Gorth fleet, though in disarray, was reforming. Their planetary bombardment had been delayed but not prevented. "They'll be in firing position within 30 minutes, Reynolds continued. "Without their primary command structure, they're falling back on secondary protocols." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Then we hit them again." Reynolds shook her head. "There's no time for another boarding action. We need something bigger." She paused, her eyes meeting his. Something they'll never see coming. The doors of the command center slid open, and a figure walked in, tall, imposing, dressed in a uniform Daniel didn't recognize. The insignia marked him as Admiral Chun, head of the newly formed Human Defense Force. "Commander Briggs," Chun said, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. "I understand you've gained some first-hand experience with our enemy." Daniel straightened. "Yes, sir." Chun nodded toward the holographic display. "Then you know what we're up against. The Gorth don't just want to win. They want to eradicate us." "What's your plan, sir?" Daniel asked. Chen's eyes narrowed. "Operation Prometheus. It's experimental, untested, and likely suicidal. But it's the only card we have left to play." The display shifted, showing a classified schematic of the Thunderstrike, but with modifications. Massive modifications. "The Thunderstrike isn't just a warship," Chen explained. "It's a delivery system. Beneath the main hull lies the Singularity Core, technology we've been developing for years." Daniel's eyes widened. A black hole weapon? Not exactly, Chin replied. When detonated, it creates a temporary gravitational shear, a tear in space-time. Anything caught within the radius will be removed. Valdez whistled. You mean atomized? I mean erased, Chin corrected, as if it never existed. Reynolds stepped forward. The radius is large enough to engulf the entire Gore fleet, but we need to position the Thunderstrike at the exact center of their formation. Daniel understood immediately. A suicide run. Chin nodded. The ship will need to be steered manually through the final approach. Auto-navigation won't cut it. The Gorth will jam it. We need someone with the reflexes to thread the needle. The room fell silent. Everyone knew who he meant. Daniel exhaled slowly. When do we start? Now, Chin replied. The Singularity Core is charging as we speak. You'll have one shot at this, Briggs. Make it count. The evacuation of the Thunderstrike began immediately. Crew members rushed to escape pods and auxiliary vessels, leaving only a skeleton crew behind. Daniel stood on the bridge, now eerily empty, his hands resting on the navigational controls. Valdez approached, his gear packed. Last chance to change your mind, boss. Daniel smirked. And miss all the fun? Not a chance. It's been an honor, Valdez said, extending his hand. Daniel shook it firmly. Get everyone to safety. That's an order. Valdez nodded, then turned to leave. At the doorway, he paused. Give M. Hell, Briggs. Then he was gone. Reynolds was the last to leave, her face unreadable. The core will be fully charged in 15 minutes, she said. You'll need to initiate the final sequence manually from the engineering deck. Daniel nodded. I know the drill. She hesitated, then stepped forward and pressed something into his hand. A small data chip. If by some miracle you survive this, she said quietly, this contains coordinates to a rendezvous point. We'll wait 24 hours. Daniel pocketed the chip. Don't hold your breath. With a final nod, Reynolds departed, leaving Daniel alone on the bridge. He turned to the viewport, where the stars stretched endlessly, and somewhere among them the Gorth fleet waited. Just you and me now, he muttered to the empty ship. The Thunderstrike trembled as its engines roared to life. Daniel guided the massive warship forward, accelerating toward the heart of the enemy fleet. Warning signals flashed across his console. The Gorth had detected his approach. Defensive fire erupted from their ships, energy beams slicing through the void. Daniel's hands flew across the controls, the ship responding to his touch like an extension of his own body. He weaved between the incoming fire, pushing the engines beyond their limits. The hull groaned under the strain. A direct hit rocked the ship, sending sparks cascading from ruptured conduits. Computer, damage report. Daniel called out. Port side armor at 42%. Shields failing. Engine efficiency at 78%. Daniel gritted his teeth. Good enough. The Gorth fleet loomed large in the viewport, thousands of warships arranged in a concave formation, preparing to rain destruction on the human colonies below. Their flagship, though damaged, still dominated the center, a massive behemoth bristling with weapons, and Daniel was heading straight for it. More hits rocked the ship. Systems failed across the board, but the Thunderstrike pushed on, driven by Daniel's unwavering determination. He was close now, so close he could see the individual weapon emplacements on the enemy vessels, all turning to focus on him. Computer, time the Singularity Core full charge? 2 minutes, 14 seconds. Daniel nodded. Begin final approach. The ship lurched forward, accelerating toward the center of the enemy formation. The weapon's fire intensified, scores of hits pounding against the Thunderstrike's hull. Warnings blared across every console, breaches in multiple sectors, structural integrity failing. But Daniel didn't slow down. If anything, he pushed harder. 1 minute to full charge. He was inside the formation now, enemy ships surrounding him on all sides. Their fire was so intense that the void itself seemed to glow with energy. The thunderstrike shuddered violently, systems failing in cascades. A massive explosion rocked the bridge. Console screen shattered, plunging half the room into darkness. Daniel was thrown from his seat, his head slamming against the metal floor. Blood trickled down his temple, but he dragged himself back to the controls. 30 seconds to full charge. The main viewport cracked, then splintered entirely. Emergency force fields barely containing the atmosphere. Through the crackling energy barrier, Daniel could see the Gore flagship directly ahead, an impossibly large silhouette against the stars. 15 seconds. Daniel's fingers danced across the controls, adjusting course one final time. The ship was barely responding now, more wreckage than warship, but it only needed to last a few more seconds. 10 seconds. He thought of Earth, of the colonies, of all the humans who would never know how close they came to extinction this day. 5 seconds. Daniel closed his eyes, a smile playing at his lips. He had started this war with the Goreth when he killed their warlord. Now, he would end it. Singularity core charged, ready for detonation. Daniel took a deep breath. Initiate! He expected pain. He expected darkness. Instead, there was silence. The console beeped, an error message flashing across the screen. Error. Manual detonation required at core location. Daniel's heart sank. Of course. Nothing was ever simple. He staggered his feet, the ship breaking apart around him. The route to the engineering deck would be treacherous, possibly impassable, but he had to try. Daniel sprinted to the corridors, leaping over fallen beams and sealed bulkheads. The ship groaned, the sound of metal tearing echoing through every passageway. Gravity fluctuated as systems failed, occasionally sending him floating before slamming him back to the deck. Another hit rocked the ship, the hull breaching nearby. Daniel was thrown against a wall, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle. He cried out in pain, but pushed himself forward. The engineering deck was just ahead. The door was sealed, emergency protocols activated. Daniel slammed his good hand against the control panel, but it was dead. No power. Damn it, he growled, looking around desperately. There, an emergency access hatch, meant for maintenance crews. Daniel wrenched it open with his one functioning arm and crawled inside, dragging himself through the narrow passage. Every movement sent waves of agony through his broken limb, but he refused to stop. Finally, he emerged onto the engineering deck and froze. The singularity core dominated the center of the room, a pulsing sphere of energy contained within a lattice of gravitational fields. But standing before it was a Goreth warrior, massive, armored, and all too familiar. High Commander Vern himself. The alien turned, its mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. Human, it hissed. So predictable. Daniel's eyes darted around the room, looking for a weapon, any weapon. His sidearm was gone, lost somewhere during his desperate journey through the ship. How? Daniel started. Did I get aboard? Varun finished. Your boarding tactics. We learned them, adapted them, improved them. The alien gestured to the Singularity Core. A magnificent weapon. It will serve the Goreth well once we reverse engineer it from a wreckage. Daniel clenched his fist. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Varun stepped closer, towering over him. I understand perfectly. You humans thought you could challenge us. You thought your rage would save you. The alien's claws flexed, but rage without power is meaningless. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You still don't get it, do you? He took a step forward, pain shooting through his body, but his voice steady. It's not about the rage. It's about what comes after. Varun tilted his head, confused. Determination, Daniel continued, taking another step. The refusal to submit. The willingness to sacrifice everything. His hand slipped behind his back, feeling for something, anything, he could use. That's what makes humans dangerous. Not because we're angry, but because we'll do whatever it takes. His fingers closed around a piece of broken metal, jagged, sharp, and just heavy enough. Varun's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. And yet here you stand, broken, defeated. Daniel smiled, blood staining his teeth. Not yet. He lunged forward, faster than the alien expected, driving the metal shard into Varun's leg. The Gorth screeched in pain, his bladed arm swinging down. Daniel rolled, the blade missing by inches. He scrambled toward the core, his broken arm hanging uselessly at his side. Varun recovered quickly, his massive form blocking Daniel's path. You cannot win this fight, human. Daniel spat blood onto the deck. Don't need to. He feinted left, then dove right, sliding under the alien's guard. Varun's blade slashed down, catching Daniel across the back. He cried out as the blade sliced through his flesh, but the momentum carried him forward, toward the core's manual activation panel. One chance. That's all he needed. Varun roared, charging forward. Daniel twisted, grabbing a fallen beam with his good arm and swinging it with all his remaining strength. It connected with the alien's head with a sickening crack, staggering Varun just long enough. Daniel slammed his palm against the activation panel. Core detonation sequence initiated. 10 seconds of detonation. Varun's eyes widened in understanding, then narrowed in fury. He lunged forward, blades raised to the kill. Daniel didn't move. His mission was complete. His fight was over. 9, 8. Varun's blade pierced Daniel's chest, the pain white-hot and all-consuming. Daniel gasped, blood filling his lungs, but he didn't look away. He stared directly into the alien's eyes, a smile playing at his lips. 7, 6. You've lost, Daniel whispered. Varun's mandibles clicked furiously. If I die, you die with me. Daniel chuckled, blood bubbling from his lips. That was always the plan. 5, 4. The ship shuddered, systems failing all around them. The battle outside continued, unaware of what was about to happen. 3, 2. Daniel closed his eyes, thinking of Earth, of home, of a sky that would remain free because of what he'd done here. 1. The singularity core detonated. There was no explosion, no fire, no sound, just a silent pulse that expanded outward from the thunderstrike, distorting space itself. The Gorth fleet, thousands of vessels strong, wavered like mirages in a desert, their forms stretching, twisting, then simply vanishing. Where once there had been an armada poised to destroy humanity, there was nothing. No debris, no wreckage, no traces. Just empty space, as if they had never existed at all. Aboard the evacuation ships, Valdez watched in stunned silence as the enemy fleet disappeared. Reynolds stood beside him, her face unreadable. Did it work? Someone whispered. Reynolds nodded. They're gone. All of them. Valdez turned to her. And Briggs. She didn't answer, but her eyes said everything. Daniel Briggs was gone too, erased from existence along with the enemy he'd fought so hard to defeat. Valdez looked back to the stars. Hell of a way to go, he murmured. Hours later, as the evacuation ships regrouped, preparing to return to the colonies they had saved, a single distress beacon activated on the edge of the system. A tiny escape pod, barely large enough for one person, drifting through the void. Inside, bloody but alive, Daniel Briggs opened his eyes. In his hand, he clutched the data chip Reynolds had given him. Coordinates to a rendezvous point. Somehow, at the last possible second, he had reached an escape pod, launched, and been thrown clear of the Singularity's radius by the force of the Thunderstrike's remaining engines. Daniel grinned, coughing up blood. The pod's medical systems were already working to stabilize him. But he'd lost a lot of blood. His broken arm was splinted, the deep gash across his back sealed with emergency foam. He might not make it, but he'd try. Because that's what humans did. They fought, they survived, they endured. The war with the Gorth was over. This particular battle was won. But Daniel knew the galaxy was filled with threats, and humanity would need every fighter it could get. As the pod drifted through space, Its distress beacon calling out to anyone who might hear. Daniel closed his eyes, not in surrender, but in rest, because tomorrow would bring new battles, new enemies, and humanity would be ready. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson today. Never underestimate the rage of humanity or what comes after.